Hello, everybody. This is Rick, and welcome to Astralclub. This is Summoned to Planet Haven. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support this channel on Patreon, you get a number of benefits when you do. When you join as a paying member, you get a chat, which we can chat back and forth and with each other. You get the early episodes on Sunday, and of course, you can email me back and forth with priority on your questions and tell me your experiences, and be free to be as long form as you want. I know not everybody wants to leave something long in the comments. And if you're interested, there will be a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like a lesson to learn how to Astral Project, I'd be more than glad to work with you. You will find an email in the description. So just go ahead and send me a request for some more information on lessons. Okay, just want to quickly thank everyone who sent me healing energy from last week. I really appreciate it. Okay, Summoned to Planet Haven. I was actually having a conference with my angel guide, and one of the things that was brought up was Peter's status. And of course, I've been keeping my angel guide up to date because Peter's my acolyte, he's my responsibility. And I remember when I suggested that he have a sabbatical on Haven, he questioned whether he wasn't running away from his responsibilities here on Earth. I told him that I didn't know if there was a modicum of that, but I think what he needed was exposure to these purely loving beings, and that it would help him to overcome the prejudices that he had inherited from his past lifetime in the late 19th, early 20th century as a Catholic priest in Ireland. So it was approved, and of course he's been on Planet Haven now for some time. Now time goes by a little bit differently on Haven than it does here, and I'm not exactly sure what the difference is, but I know there is a difference. But as you recall, I can't just go to Haven. I have to be summoned because I don't want to be in a situation where some being that's more powerful than I am could suck that location out of my head and ruin what to me is a pretty nice paradise. So, coincidentally perhaps, not long after my meeting with my angel was done, is I felt that tingle and that summon to Planet Haven. So I responded immediately and found myself losing consciousness as I was whirring through space. When I regained consciousness, I was in that same beautiful, unearthly cove that I always arrive at. And you've got this lavender-colored sea just gently lapping up against the coast. You've got all these tropical flowers and plants of all these colors. These from brights to pastel. It's just, they don't assault the senses. They massage the senses. It gives you a feeling of belonging. It's as if the entire environment is just one of peace. No stress, no strain, no worry. It's just everything is well. Everything's beautiful. Everything is the way it's supposed to be. Now, the Havenites, you might remember, are bridging. They're in the upper third, and they can also, at will, go into the lower fourth dimensions. So they're very advanced creatures, much more advanced than we humans are. And if you recall, I sent Peter to Haven at his own request once I'd exposed him to it, because he, first of all, always loved plants, and so I thought that was a great idea. But also, I thought that he needed some exposure to unconditional love without lots of rules and regulations that we have on Earth, and that certainly he learned in his lifetime, which he was having some difficulty overcoming as a guide, because he had volunteered as a guide on Earth. And that is very serious, by the way. When one becomes a guide, one has made a commitment. And unlike commitments here on Earth that seem to be so easily disposed of, once you make a commitment in the astral to be a guide, that's not something that is so easy to slip. But I was interested to see what was going on. And very soon I was met by a delegation of my Havenite friends. I didn't see Peter yet, but they had invited me to follow them, and we sat down in one of their groves. And I still didn't see Peter, but my mind started receiving signals telepathically, and they're not a very hasty people. They are very much into kind of catching up, wanting to know every little detail of your life, and you wanting to know, to be polite, every detail, everything that's happened on their planet and in their lives. I think it's just part of getting simpatico going. And perhaps, as we animals tend to be very, very hasty. We're always in a very big hurry. But the Havenites have a different look on things. I guess they look at time in a different way. They don't see, relationship building necessarily as something that should be done quickly. They want to make sure that they know exactly where the other entity is coming from and what they're struggling with, and how they can help, and it's also interesting hearing about their experiences. And it's not a lot of interesting things that I could share with you here. I mean, other than their temperature has been very pleasant and they've had a good amount of rain. Their people are happy. This is a lot of news for them. For us, I know it's not that exciting. Here, we humans, we tend to thrill with the disasters. We want, oh my goodness, they got a blizzard, 20 inches of snow. Or, oh, it hasn't rained there for 2 years. Or, oh, it rained 10 inches and now it's flooded. We tend to like the extraordinary, especially when it tends to be bad. I don't know. For some reason, it attracts our attention. That's why, news stories about bad things happening get a lot higher ratings than the good things. And I guess that says something about who we are as a species. So finally, after the introductions and catching up was over, I could tell that they had something they wanted to breach to me, but they weren't sure how to do it, and they were uncomfortable, which was a weird feeling for them. And therefore, I became uncomfortable because I could tell they were uncomfortable. And so I just suggested, I said, hey, what's going on? Feel free to tell me. You guys are, that you Havenites are my friends. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me. We're good friends. And so with that, they started, and I always say they because there's always more than one voice talking at the same time. But generally, they're on the same wavelength, pretty much saying the same things. So once you get used to hearing it like 3 different ways at the same time, you kind of get used to it. It's distracting at first, hearing 3 different input voices all saying pretty much the same thing. But that's just the way they do things. So what they got across to me was they had an unusual request for me, one that they weren't quite sure how to handle because they'd never handled it before, and they were a little embarrassed because I'd given them Peter to help train for his position on earth, and now he's made a request of them which unsettled them. And so I said, well, I apologize. Please tell me what this request was that has caused you any distress, because that's the last thing I wish to cause on this lovely, peaceful, passive planet. They said, well, your acolyte, the one who calls himself Peter, has indicated that he would like to join with our race. Whoa, I thought for a second. That's a big step. I had expected them to have a good influence on him so that he'd be a better guide back on Earth. But I hadn't necessarily expected he'd want to convert, I guess is a good term. I said, well, how do you feel about his request? They said that we've been communicating about it now for many days because there's no precedent. We have never had a being, especially an animal being from another planet, want to become one with our species and who we are. We are open to discussing it because we like Peter. They didn't say exactly like. It was more like we gel with him or he doesn't disrupt us. That's kind of a better, I think, version of what they said. I said, well, that's good. Do you see, what process would this take if this was to happen? Well, they said, first we'd have to get your permission, of course, since he's your acolyte. But after that, then he would have to pass a test, which all of us have to pass before we become one with the planet, the Havenite species. And I said, can you tell me what that test is? And they said, no, we can't. That is a secret test that cannot be told ahead of time. I said, okay, I respect that. So if I give permission, let's say, I'm going to want to talk to Peter first. But let's say I give permission and he takes this test and passes it. What happens then? Well, he says then at that point, we would just absorb him into our planetary consciousness. He would become one with us. I thought about that for a second. I asked, well, would he ever be able to individuate again at some later time? And they said, oh, yes, if he wills it, he can definitely individuate and leave the collective permanently or for some portion of time, if he wills it. I said, okay. Then let me talk to Peter, and we'll go from there. A few minutes went by, and Peter came walking into the glade. And I motioned for him to sit down on a rock next to the rock that I was sitting on. I asked him straight out. I said, Peter, I'm told that you want to join the Havenites, that you want to become one with these people. Is that true? He said, yes, it is. I asked him, why? He thought about it, and he said that he felt like he belonged here. He felt peaceful here for the first time in his life. He felt a belonging here. He felt just alive and just so happy. I said, okay, let me ask you another question. I understand what joining the Havenites might do for you, but what's it going to do for them? Do you think that your individualism might harm their community? He thought about it for a minute and then shook his head and said, I have nothing but respect for these people. The last thing I'd want to do is try to impose what we've already agreed, Rick, are outdated concepts of mine. And I've been working on getting rid of them, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job. But these people, the last thing I'd want to do is try to make them into, Earth people, because they've achieved a level of community and peace that we here on Earth haven't even sampled yet. And the last thing I want to do is be the fly in that ointment. I'm not going to be the snake in the garden for these people. That's not where I'm coming from. I then said, well, what about your commitment to the Earth? You made a commitment to the Earth, not only through your reincarnations, but as a guide. You volunteered as a guide. That is a sacred duty. It's not something that one takes on and then just throws away willy-nilly. What about that? He said, I thought about that as well, and I am not negating my commitment. My plan is to share consciousness with these people long enough, and then when I can, I'll take the equivalent of a sabbatical again, this time to Earth. And I'll use the benefits that I've learned from these lovely people to help the people of Earth. And I think I could be a much better guide after this experience here on Haven than I ever could have been without it. I wanted to make sure that he wasn't running away, because if he'd told me that he was running away from Earth, or that he wanted nothing more to do with Earth, and that he was just trying to dismiss his commitments, then I would have said no. But based on everything that he told me, I couldn't help but agree. He asked me if I'd have any trouble with my angel guide on this matter. I said, I'll have some explaining to do, yes, because you were assigned to me as an acolyte guide, and now you're going to detach and become one with these people for a period of time. But I'll explain it to him. He'll understand one way or another, so don't worry about that. I want to make sure that if you're sure this is the right thing, then you have my blessing. He looked like he wanted to cry a little bit, but he didn't have the tears, not in his astral body. So I turned from Peter and I turned to the group of Havenites who were standing by, and I said, well, you've got my permission for him to join your people and undergo your tests. So they said, okay, very well. And then one of the, whenever I say one, I mean three. Three of the voices chimed in and invited me to stay and watch the test, because they said it might be interesting to you, especially as an animal, which I didn't know quite what to make of that. But I said, okay, sure, I'll stay. So we all made our way back to the crystal caves, which we visited before when we were on Haven. And of course, there's this long, beautiful crystal tunnel that looks like it's been cored out by a heavy coring machine. But I know they use sound to excavate. And after this long crystal tunnel, we emerged in this enormous crystal cathedral. And, there was these crystal stalactites just hanging down from this enormous ceiling. and then we were all in this very large hall, kind of like a St. Paul's Cathedral kind of hall, big. And so I just kind of stood off to the side. And one of the Havenites told me that since my ability to read their minds wasn't perfect yet, what he was going to do was translate in a picture form what Peter was going through in this test so that I could see, like from Peter's standpoint, what the test was and what he was going through. And I said, can I just ask before this starts, like, what's the basic purpose of this test? And they said it's a test of pacifism. It's a test of the sacredness of life. And if you truly understand and agree with those principles, you can pass this test. But it's not an easy test. I got that. So I was curious. So as I stood there, and Peter was just standing in the middle, and he was surrounded by a circle of these lovely Havenite peoples. Beautiful, beautiful plants. Lovely plants. And they projected to me what Peter was seeing. And what Peter was a Havenite plant. And it was like the old days before their primary predator became extinct and before they woke up as a race. And this primary predator was it was a parasite. It was an insect. I'd say it was about the size of a large cockroach. And it kind of looked like a cockroach, except for it didn't have as many legs, and it seemed to have a long proboscis that was meant, well, for sucking, I guess. And so I saw this thing crawling on Peter the Havenite. And I saw Peter getting a little nervous, but he maintained his calm. And this thing crawled up till it came up to the head part of the plant, where it implanted its suckers, its proboscis, and started to suck the juices right out of Peter and Peter's Haven body in this particular vision test. I could feel just the whole ickiness of this whole thing. Every single fiber in my being wanted to flick this thing away. I mean, let's face it, every animal fiber in my body wants to get rid of a parasite. But Peter, I got to admit it, man, he just stood there. And this thing sucked, and it sucked, and it sucked, and it got bigger, and it got bigger, and he got smaller, and he started to shrivel up until he eventually died. Then the test was over. He passed. The test was of whether he was willing to be passive and to put the life of another being, in this case, this now extinct parasite, put its life ahead of his own, and to be completely peaceful, completely passive, completely respectable of life. So with that, he was embraced by all of the other Havenites, and they all started singing together, and Peter sang right with him. And I just stood by and just marveled at because when that humming tune, it sounds unearthly, and it echoes off of this enormous crystal chamber. It sounds heavenly. It sounds heavenly. It's the only way I can describe it. Everything was vibrating inside the chamber. I was filled with energy just hearing this song and feeling the vibrations of this crystal chamber, which was coming alive with these vibrations, with this energy. It reached a crescendo, and I'm glad it did because I didn't think I could take anymore. And then it subsided. Peter was now a member of their race. I said my final goodbyes to him and my friends, and I said, Peter, I'm going to say to you auf Wiedersehen, which of course in German means till we meet again. And he sent me a similar greeting. With that, I returned to my body and awoke. I hope you liked that experience. If you did, hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. Any questions and comments? I love that stuff. You know, it could end up on a future question and answers episode. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.